Welcome back to the show. If you're a hockey fan and you're new to this, we call the show Wooden Sticks. I'm in my late 50s, so it takes us back to a time when, well, we played with wooden sticks. And we are broadcasting from the Aquarius Home Services Studios, and thrilled to be here. It's a great time to be a hockey fan, that's for sure, because boys and girls high school hockey is in full force. By the time you get to where we are right now, which is, as we record, late December, but when you're digesting this, early January. Happy New Year to you. Hope you had a great holiday season and New Year. And now you're into crunch time. You know, the girls have basically a month and change to go in their season, and then they ramp up for that mid-February, late February kind of push to the state tournament. And, you know, with boys hockey, we're about halfway through the season. So you kind of identify now who the real contenders are, and you start to see how the top teams are matching up. Moorhead looks to be one of the teams to beat. As always, I think there's a lot of parity in the big side of schools on the AA side. So if you're a hockey fan, you know, high school hockey's in full force. College hockey is just getting out of their holiday break and second half of the schedule now. We've got some great local teams here, starting with the Golden Gophers, who look like a legitimate national tournament contender. And then obviously with the hockey, we got World Juniors that's ongoing. And we've got plenty of reasons as local hockey fans to watch that. We've got the Minnesota Wild going guns a-blazing. You've got the Minnesota Frost in the middle of their schedule, and they're off to a great start. So, yeah, there's a lot to dive into. And I think because we live in the state of hockey, we get pulled in 18 different directions. But for some of us, I mean, obviously I'm on the Wild beat, so I'm focused in on that. And the last couple of weeks has been a little bit up and down. They're still dealing with some vital players off on injury. We think Middleton comes back in the next week or two. Jacob Lauko, who's been such a great addition to this team, his energy, his speed. Yeah, it's a bottom six role, but I think, you know, it gets really understated how much he means to this hockey club with the physical play, and he'll drop the mitts and just the juice he brings. You take Middleton and Lauko, Kirill, you know, for a while there, you're talking about a lot of players that create an awful lot of energy on and off the ice for this team. And the fact that they've been able to kind of maintain their posts there in the upper echelon, I think by points percentage, they're fifth in the league. They're still chasing down Winnipeg for top billing in the division, one of the greatest, I think maybe the best division in the NHL. So they've kind of held their own, but they've got to get back to health here in January. And because they played that road-heavy schedule in October and into November, they're going to have a lot of home games coming up here, which is going to be fantastic. So I think they'll be fine. But today on the show, I wanted to get back to high school hockey. I think right now, such an important time, as I mentioned, with the high school hockey schedule. And I had this guy on my list from day one as a guy I wanted to have on the show. Sean Goldsworthy spent 20 years as the head coach at St. Olaf with their men's program. And then now has spent the last, nearly 8 years at Minnetonka, both places where he played and went. So that's kind of a neat tie-in as well. His dad was a legendary North Star. For you younger listeners out there, Bill Goldsworthy played 10 years for the North Stars from 67 to 77. He had this really unique celebration when he scored a goal called the Goldy Shuffle. You can YouTube that and really enjoy some of those old highlights from the Met Center. Just a legendary figure in the history of hockey in this market. And I didn't have the benefit of getting to know Bill Goldsworthy. I got his autograph as a young kid. I used to go to North Stars practices. For a lot of years, they would practice over in Burnsville, and I would sneak into our rink and get to watch the guys practice. So I had an autograph. I had a picture taken with him at a car dealership. Back then, the players used to go do promotional deals at local businesses. And so I didn't really know Bill, but I've gotten to know his kid, Sean, for many, many years, and just a class act, and, you know, coaches for all the right reasons. He's fantastic at his craft. He's got this personality, which I think you'll definitely connect with here on the show today, where he has a way of bringing people, and specifically kids, together in a locker room, and they do great things. He's won 2 state championships already in his short time at Minnetonka, and he's a great ambassador for the game of hockey, and I love his passion. Like, this guy does it for the right reasons, and I think you look at high school coaches in general, and I did it back in the day, they're there for the right reasons, and we're lucky to have them. And especially here in Minnesota, where high school hockey is so revered. So we're going to have a great conversation today with Goldy. We're going to go back to those North Star days, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, but we're going to really focus in on the Minnetonka Skippers, that program, some of the great teams he's coached back in, I think, 2018 and 2023, as he had two different runs to state championships, which is pretty remarkable when you consider how hard that section is. I mean, I got to tell you, just getting out of that section is pretty damn hard. But to get out of that section and win a couple of tournaments, it's obvious that he and his staff know what they're doing. So, yeah, Minnetonka Skippers, boys high school hockey, all kinds of fun stuff today on the show. That'll be the meat and potatoes. This is just the appetizer. And when I think of food, I think of my dear friend, John Schweitz. He and I have that same passion, that same palate, so to speak. And I'll be seeing John here in the new year, and we can laugh about that. I hope he's not listening right now. But anyway, John's a big part of our show because one of our lead sponsors, of course, is the Minnesota Masonic Charities. They've got the Cancer Center. They've got the hospital at the U of M, the Children's Hospital, that is, the Masonic Home over in Bloomington. All the great work that the Freemasons support here in Minnesota, the largest fraternal organization in the world. Masons have consistently answered that call when it comes to charitable needs, and we're so happy to have them a part of our show here on Wooden Sticks. And of course, a quick message now from one of our newest sponsors, that is OnX Maps.
We've told you about OnX Hunt. Now let me tell you about OnX Fish. Ice fishing is here, and it's time to hit the frozen water with OnX Fish. The Fish app is the most comprehensive fishing tool for increasing your confidence on ice. Use OnX Fish to find new places to fish and sort lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potentials. OnX Fish also shows you hot spots, lake-by-lake regulations, and private and public land ownership information. For a limited time, download OnX Fish for free in Minnesota and Wisconsin, or go to onxmaps.com/fish to get more information on the app that is changing the game on ice.
Welcome back here on Wooden Sticks, as always, recording from the Aquarius Home Services studio. Looking forward to this conversation today. A longtime friend of mine, terrific ambassador for the game of hockey here in Minnesota, head coach of the Minnetonka Skippers boys team. He is my guy, Sean Goldsworthy. Sean, thanks for doing this.
Amen, Gorgie. It's always fun to catch up with you, and anything I can do to help out high school hockey or the state of hockey in Minnesota, it's been so good to me.
Well, you've had a hell of a run. And so I think I have a pretty good idea, but being that we call the show Wooden Sticks, it takes us back to, for a lot of us of a certain age, certainly not your players at Minnetonka right now, but for us in our 50s, we started the game playing with wooden sticks. I know your dad was a longtime legendary Minnesota North Star because of my obsession with that team. And I assume that had something to do with how you eventually came to the game of hockey as a kid. Take us through kind of your memories of the start of your hockey career.
Well, first off, I love the title Wooden Sticks. It makes me feel older than I probably am, but yeah, the game has transpired pretty quick. And I remember using the old Louisville wooden stick that was green that my dad took from Dave Gagne back in the Stars days. And I used to use the old Neil Broughton sticks as well. And I've told both of those gentlemen in passing how I revered those guys because I had to figure out their pattern. But yeah, that's a great memory right there. But the memories of hockey and growing up in the state of hockey, I've seen every level, through the North Stars with my dad, and then having gone through college and now into the high school level and youth hockey as well in the state of Minnesota. I've just been so blessed to meet so many high-end people over the years, just people that are giving up knowledge for free and making sure they're good stewards of the game. So it's been a pleasure to kind of help continue that. I feel like I've been around a lot longer than I probably should have. I started a little younger than most. And, now into my early 50s, I feel like I'm one of the old guys, but I still got some jump in my step. But yeah, my memories go back to, as a young kid watching the North Stars in the late 70s and early 80s. They had a couple of really good runs there, and, just idolizing Neil Broughton, just thinking he was just off the charts, and his game was so cerebral and so connected with his teammates. I remember fondly telling many people I learned to play hockey on the ride home from the Met Center. It was about a 30-minute drive back home when my dad was scouting, and he would quiz me on different shifts that Neil had during the game. And it had nothing to do with his puck play. It had everything to do with off the puck play. And it was just such a great way to learn and have a conversation one-on-one. We're all parents, so we know that those times are pretty special. But that's the fondest of my memories of learning the game.
And I think for a lot of us, Goldy, that were Minnesota players, when Neil Broughton got to that level with the Miracle on Ice team, winning the national championship for Herbie at the U of M, and then, as you're mentioning, starring at the NHL level with the North Stars, it resonated more for us because he was one of us, and it proved like, we can do this. And I think people forget, before 1980, college kids, specifically Minnesota kids, and the NHL was far more a rarity. Now it's commonplace. For kids these days, there are Minnesota kids littered all over the NHL on different rosters, but back then it was a pretty big deal. And so you could identify with one of us at that level as a star player, and that was huge.
Absolutely. I think people need to take a little bit of a step back and look at those days. They were, Americans in the NHL playing significant roles was still pretty limited. And nowadays, not only is the college game, but just everything has gone up so much higher. Just look at the NHL draft. And, we talk about our kids here at Minnetonka to dream big, because if they do, and things work out for them and their game develops, you can become a Jake Gardner, you can become a Justin Hull, a Bobby Brink. You can work yourself through, whether it's, in our community or any others. Like look at what Brock Faber's doing right now. It's just such a thrill to watch him come from our communities and then thrive in the NHL and on the, even the international level. So, Neil was a rarity at the time. And I think a lot of us took ownership on it, and Minnesota hockey had so much pride in seeing those guys succeed.
At what age did you realize, and you were probably pretty young, that your dad was a legendary North Star? I think the name Goldsworthy, if you're a North Star fan, makes everybody smile. Like, I think of, I have a lot of conversations with Tom Reed. I've traveled with him for a couple of decades on covering the Wild, and we have great chats about your dad and the type of player he was and the type of guy he was. At what age did you start to realize what a big deal your dad was with the North Stars?
Well, I think my dad did a pretty good job of kind of sheltering myself and my sister from a lot of the attention. And back then, those guys were part of a community. I don't think, you were above going to the local grocery store and hanging out with people. And so my dad did a lot of that, and people just knew him as Bill, as Mr. Goldsworthy in the neighborhood. So I think when we ever got outside of our community and went maybe downtown or, on maybe a larger stage, then I would run into some pretty good, stories and reverence, especially when we go to Canada, stuff like that, where he's from. Yeah. It's up in, Niagara Falls and Kitchener, Waterloo area. So that's where my parents are from. But, I just remember Tom Reed and like Lou Nanny and JP Parisi. Those guys were my uncles. They were brotherhood of the North Stars. So they were just around our house. Like, it was weird. And I still tell them, I still see Tommy and Louie from time to time. And now I'm seeing Lou's grandsons and kids around the area. And it was just normal. So to me, I think the kids nowadays growing up, I've had a couple kids in our community, like, Mason Hendrickson and Beckett Hendrickson have played for me, Darby's kids. And again, I think they've done a really good job of just being part of the community. So they don't really realize it until you get outside of maybe your immediate, city.
And you're such a natural at what you do on the coaching side. Was there a time as a player when you were growing up, whether it was youth hockey, high school hockey, or beyond, where you kind of figured, coaching might be something I want to do? How did that passion cultivate? And I mean, it seems like a natural now that I've known you for all these years and seeing the great successes and seeing how you relate to kids and just what an awesome job you do. But was there a point growing up where you thought this might be something I could do and I'd be good at?
Getting through college at St. Olaf, I really had no interest in coaching or even teaching. I was planning to be a physical therapist. So when I got done playing, I went back and got my master's degree and then was kind of moving into the private sector. And at that time, there was a turnover in Division III hockey where I played with some head coaches that had been there for a long time. And my mentor and head coach was a guy named Whitey Oss, who's just a legend in himself too, in so many circles, starting up in the Roseville area and then coming down to St. Olaf and coaching there for over 24 years and being an athletic director. So, Whitey was kind of a second father figure to me and really helped me grow. And when they came knocking, when he was retiring, I really didn't think much about it. But I did previously spend the first year with John Harrington at St. John's. I was finishing up my master's and I saw him at the rink and he said, "Hey, have you ever thought about helping out?" And I just thought it was just good to hang around John. I was interested just to creating a relationship with him. And so I started hanging around the National Hockey Center and got to really enjoy working with John. But then also got to know, Craig Dahl really well. Brett Peterson, who's now at Gustavus or just recently retired. And then, Tom Saratori, who's up at Bemidji, were the two assistants there. And we just started getting into hockey talk, and it was outstanding. And I kind of fell in love with the game again from a different angle. And so the next thing you know, I'm 26, 27 years old, and I'm jumping into a full-time job at St. Olaf and, did 20 years there. And I was just so blessed to go back to my alma mater and lead young men and kind of learn as we go at the Division III level, which a lot of us did. I think a lot of coaches started at Division III and you kind of figure out how to coach and you're kind of doing everything outside of driving the bus. And it was just such a blessing for me to get started in my career and be around some really high-end quality people.
And when you're a college coach at a place like St. Olaf, and I've had this conversation with our mutual friend, John Pazzacchini. Buzzy's a dear friend, coach on the women's side down there for just under a decade. It's great hockey, and people have no idea until they punch in and either play at the level or go watch a game. What a high level brand of hockey Division III hockey is. But recruiting to a place like St. Olaf is tricky because you not only have to find great hockey players, you have to find kids that have a great academic record. And those two don't always go hand in hand. And so that had to be a huge challenge. And that had to be part of the evolution as you built your program and spent your 20 years there. How did that kind of, work its way into your brand of recruiting? Because I've watched you recruit and I know at the college level how competitive that is. And your personality brings people to you. But the academics, Goldy, is a big deal down there.
Well, I think every Division III school has its limitations, and at some schools where I was, it's got the first and foremost is the academic filter, and you need some really high-end Ivy League kids that are, willing to truly be a student athlete, like truly are grinding it out day by day. They're full-time students. They probably have 4 or 5 hours of homework per night, and then they're also going to put in about 4 or 5 hours of hockey every afternoon. So it's a full slate. You got to really find kids that love the game. I think that I was able to identify that pretty quick. Having played at that level really helped me identify the right kids. I think that was key. But also at that level, you just learn, it's kind of baptismal by fire. You learn to coach every position, every special team, every angle. I remember doing fundraising. I remember doing just about everything that a support staff would do at the college Division I level or even the USHL level now. I think a lot of the guys that are coaching now, still into their 40s and 50s. I just had a good conversation with Luke Strand. He started at Eau Claire. Now he's at Mankato State. We've been friends for almost 30 years. And we always go back to how much we learned early in our careers and without the pressure of having to win or lose your job. So I think it was really key for a lot of us to kind of grow. And that goes back to even guys like I mentioned before, Craig Dahl started at Bethel and then River Falls, and then next thing you know, he's at St. Cloud, kind of taking over for Herbie, and just the whole growth factor. The guys that have been around the game really know the foundation pieces that you need, and you need good opportunities to learn and then grow and share with each other.
Yeah, it makes sense. And, I had a wonderful go of it at St. Thomas, both as a player, as a grad
Yep.
assistant with Terry Skripek, and then on the women's side. And I loved, honestly, Goldie, I loved the recruiting process. I loved getting to know the families and having that connection. And then, trying to figure out how to pick a team. It kind of reminds me now of playing fantasy football in a weird way, because you try to plan out how everything's going to fit together and how you're going to get offense from one side, defense from another, the goaltending aspect, building for the future. And as that picture and that kind of that puzzle comes together, when you hit a couple of home runs recruiting and you get those kids in and they're great players and they're great teammates and they're having a good go of it at the school, again, I coached both high school hockey on the boys' side and college hockey and on the women's and men's side. There was something unique about having a chance to go out and recruit the type of players you wanted. And I loved watching them all come together. And that to me was the best part of the job.
Oh, that's for sure. I would say anybody that's been coaching and around the game like you and I have for so many years, if relationships aren't at the top of your list, you're probably in it for the wrong reason, and it's going to be short-lived. So, I mean, I just have so many fond memories. I still connect with a lot of my former players. I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but we're starting to see some of my former players now are coming through, and they have kids entering high school. And that'll be unique when I start coaching my former players' kids at some point here in the next, 5 to 10 years. So, it is, building a team, building a group or with a group of people with a common goal is special. And then when you throw, a lot of success or some winning behind it, and you start making some really fond memories, it's pretty cool. I mean, you had an opportunity to play at St. Thomas for Terry Skripek, who's one of the best guys. And, one of your former alums at St. Thomas, Steve Aronson's one of my assistant coaches that's at Minnetonka here. And we just have such a fond relationship about our Division III experience and who we played for and our teammates. And, nobody's really a five-star guy, so you learn to play to your role, and everybody's got equal value, but maybe different roles. And you really come together. And I think that's a great learning experience for life and success in people's careers, but also in their families. And I just see so many guys that have played in the MIAC that, over the last 20, 25 years that I've gotten to know. It's a special bond, no question. And you're part of it. We've been around the game together too for a long time, Gorgie. So our relationship kind of starts there too. Yeah.
Yeah, we're roughly the same age. I'm a little bit older, but you're right. We've kind of watched the whole thing kind of come together. And you were at St. Louis from the late 90s to 2016. You get to Minnetonka. Now you're going back to coaching high school. And, so you go from coaching young men, like really these guys are out there, they're college age. Some have played junior hockey for a couple of years. I'm certain you've had some kids that were, they were full-blown adults, to now going back in 2017. You almost have to adjust, Goldie, how you go about your coaching and you're relating to your players. The game is the game, but as you know, the intangibles, the other part of it, you're going back to coaching high school kids. How was that transition for you?
Yeah, well, I was really fortunate coming into Minnetonka, which for me, I might be the only guy that's coached at both his alma maters back to back, especially
Crazy.
if you consider it in reverse age order. But so blessed to come back to the community that shaped me in Minnetonka. It wasn't clear to me at the start, but it has become such a blessing and such a great decision for me now. Going into this is my 8th year now back, and I think the biggest change for me that I knew the kids would be a little younger. The two things that happened that I wasn't quite surprised with is the talent level I have here is pretty similar to a Division III player. They're very high end. They're just 16 and 17, and they're not 22. But these are Division I caliber tracking kids, and even last year we had a couple NHL drafts, so we see some really high end skill. But what I didn't anticipate as much is just really trying to fight for their attention. Just mental maturity is really difficult at 15, 16, and you need to be really on top of things and communicate well with kids. They need your time. I all know that they really need to know you care about them first before they really want to listen. When at the college level, kids are all in when they step into your program because they've had a lot of reasons to not be there and they're still loving the game. So these kids are really growing the game. You're kind of introducing them how to be a hockey player early on in their careers. So that was kind of a big part of it. But the relationships have been awesome. The kids at this level are so eager to learn, and they're so willing to work just really hard to get better. That's just so much fun. Like, it's really brought a big joy to me and our staff that we can go to the rink every day with just a ton of positive energy. And I think most of the guys that have been doing this at the high school level that I've reached out to they keep saying that too. Guys like Kurt Giles just keep saying, it's really fun to go to practice, Goldy. Like, I remember Kurt telling me that it's really fun. And he was right. And that's kind of the start of it. So I'm loving it. It's been a great move for me and my family. I love Minnetonka. It'd probably be the only place that I could see myself doing this because I just care so much about the people and the community itself.
Well, and the ultimate is to live. I think every coach, you're riding the wave of emotion with each year, with each team, with your kids, and not only to do it once, but to do it twice. And I think we got to isolate on each of your state championship teams. Let's go back to 2018. So you're fairly new still to the program as a head coach. It's your alma mater, and the history of Minnetonka high school hockey. And there's been some great teams, but to finally see this team come together and make that run in 2018, what are some of your memories of that team?
Well, I was pretty fortunate. Brian Urich before me, he left the cupboard full. I mean, we had some really, really high-end players, guys still playing, Bobby Brink's in the NHL, and we have about 4 or 5 guys still playing college hockey in the, at the highest level in the Division I, and a couple other guys in the minor leagues. So it's been really good. But I was fortunate. Brian left the cupboard full. The entire staff came back and worked with me. So we didn't have a huge turnover. That was key. I have a great AD in Ted Schultz at Minnetonka. He doesn't micromanage. He lets you run your program as long as you do it right, which I think is awesome, and it's pretty rare today. And then like Steve Aronson stayed back and coached. Mike Johnson, another alum, stayed back and coached. We just had a lot of guys that were around the program that didn't vacate. We all stuck together, and I was pretty much the new guy. So all I had to do is bring a little different energy and a little bit different focus, maybe on how to play in some certain big games. I think that was a big piece of mine. And then I was also really fortunate is one of the captains that year, senior captains, was Luke Lohheit. And Luke is my sister's son. So I've been watching Luke grow up and play hockey for over 10 years. Just, not immediate, but from a distance, and really got to know his game and his love and his leadership style. I mean, so I kind of walked into a really good deal. What was unique about that year is we weren't probably predicted to be the best team. Edina was loaded that year. Duluth East was loaded that year. So I had to bring a little bit more focus on discipline and defending and maybe some special teams that could carry us over at the end. But that was a unique start for me. We have, in hindsight, we have a lot of kids still playing. Josh Lick, he's the captain at St. Cloud State. Joey Molinar's now at Duluth. Lohheit was a captain at Duluth. Bobby Brink's in the NHL, played in Denver. We have another captain up at Alaska Fairbanks named Matt Kothe. Just a lot of really good, great players that went on and played even at the Division III level. So those kids, I think together they had success in youth hockey, but then they kind of wanted to get over the last pinnacle. And I was fortunate to come into that group.
So I think every kid that plays high school hockey in Minnesota, and I can attest to this, you can attest to this, when a season starts, the dream is to get to the tournament. You're not even thinking about winning it. It's like, oh my God, we just want to get to the state tournament. So take us back to 2018, not just the section final game, but then the aftermath of that, maybe that evening, if there was any special memories for your club that night. I know the year that we won our section final, we went back to the gymnasium at Burnsville High School and had a pep rally. I don't know what you guys all did in 2018. What was the section final game like, and what was the aftermath like when those kids realized their dream of going to the tournament was coming true?
Yeah. Well, again, that goes back to my, when I came back, I had my heart crushed in 1990. My senior year, we got to the tourney. So I knew how much it meant. But I also knew we had some unfinished business. To me, coming back to Minnetonka, one of my goals was to come back and just solidify the program and make sure the leadership was strong. But the other one was to get over the hump and win a state championship. Our community had not done it yet. And I was one of the groups that didn't get it done, but was so darn close. And that one crushed me. And I still tell Dean Blaze to this day, he broke my heart when I was 18. In the semifinals against Roseau, he broke my heart, and we kind of laugh about it now. But that was kind of my focus point. So when we got through, I would say in early January, I think we were undefeated, but we lost at home to Duluth East in a tight game. And then about 2 weeks later, I think Edina beat us at Braemar like 8-1. They just totally took us to the woodshed, and it was yucky. And Sam Walker was running all over the place, and we couldn't contain him. And they had a nice team. And I just remember going back to work and figuring it out. And then we didn't lose a game the rest of the year. And
wow,
it was such a pleasure of mine. And then to get through the section, our section's always like a mini state tournament anyways.
Yes.
It's so darn hard to get out of here, whether it's our section or section 6. But when you leave our section, you're ready to win a state championship. But that was my focus. I remember telling the kids after we beat Holy Family in double OT, and it was just a nail biter, and Noel Ron had some great teams there. And we won an OT. And I remember the kids were so excited about getting to the tourney. And I was too. I was so happy for them, right? Like, I love the kids and I want them to, but I remember telling everybody, we're not done. Like, our best day is ahead of us. We still have, like, there's more to it, like, I think a lot of teams in my experience exhale when they get to the state tournament. They don't step on the gas. And
yeah,
I think that reflects kind of how we've done when I've got our teams there, is that we feel like we should be there, and then now we feel like we should win it. And I think that there's a few programs in our state that have shown that can do that. Edina clearly has over the years, but that was my focus point on the 2018 is we're not going down there to have a good time. That will happen just by a byproduct of our process, but we're going down to win it. And we didn't check into the hotel until after we won our first game.
Oh, wow.
And that was contentious. But I remember always learning from really good guy. Well, you played for him. Tom Osiki at
Yes,
Burnsville told me, he just kept telling me, Goldy, don't take kids out of their rhythm. Tom Satterdown, Goldy, don't take them out of their rhythm. So we went to school on Thursday, and we got on the bus at 5:00, 6, whatever, and drove down to St. Paul and played a normal Thursday night game. And then we checked in at about 10:00 in the hotel. That was my mentality. And I think it really helped our kids focus. And when you can keep the distractions to a minimum, I think your kids will focus just on playing hockey.
Well, and that validates what you thought. Like, you thought, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to keep them. So how much did 2018 prepare you for 2023? Because clearly, Goldy, now your thought process has played out. It worked. You won. Now it's 5 years later. Do you do the same thing?
We did.
Oh, wow.
And it was also contentious. We went to school on Thursday, and it helped. It helped to be the number 1 seed because you're not playing at noon or at 3. You're playing at the 6:00 game, 7:00 game, that third game. And that helps because you can stay in your normal rhythm on a Thursday night. But it's hard to win 3 games in a row. You have to get your team ready for it. I think it helped, I think, to have our previous teams, one that I played on and a couple that I watched with Brian Urich, and my assistant coaches were part of that, is that that 3-day journey, you need 4 lines. You need your full set of 6D.
Mm-hmm.
You can't shorten your bench. And we learn the hard way in the late conference here that if you don't play your full bench, it's going to be a long night. And I think a lot of teams by mistake shorten their bench early in the season, and we don't. Even if we're going to lose, we're going to play everybody and get them ready for minutes late in the year. And because those 3 games in a row are really tough, taxing on the body. And sometimes you just run out of steam, especially when you hit overtime. So we stayed on the same schedule. I don't know if it's the reason why we're undefeated and won both back to back, and won 3 in a row and then did it again. I don't know if I have the answers. But I do know that having played in that tournament, it's not just physically exhausting, it's emotionally exhausting. Like,
Yep.
Everybody that's a part of that tournament from day one to the end, like, you need 2 weeks off. Like, you're gassed. Mark
sure.
Manny and I have talked about that many times from Andover. It's like, everyone's like, "Hey, did you have a good time?" And I'm like, you know what? Not really. I was working, 4 days in a row. I didn't take a second off. And I don't remember ever talking to my wife for 3 days or my kids. It was just 100% dialed in hockey. Win a game, get on to the next, scouting report, focus, get your kids ready, on to the next. And the next thing you know, you wake up and it's Sunday morning and something happened, and you hopefully are at the right end of it.
Well, and it's not only the hockey and the game planning and the practice schedule and the meal schedule, but then it's making sure your kids are okay. Like, these are high school kids, and no offense, but they're idiots. And they're in a hotel setting now that you've won that first game, and they're surrounded by other high school kids. And as a head coach, ultimately, you're the person responsible for everything. So I can only imagine how exhausting that is emotionally for you, not just the games. 3 games in 3 days is hard enough, and that'll wear you down all by itself. But then when you factor in all the intangibles, Goldie, that a state tournament can bring and all the trouble these kids can get into, I can only imagine by the time you get to Sunday, you're ready just to check out.
Yeah, I was fortunate early on to have a lot of people. Like, our support staff is really good here, and people that like took on all that extra stuff. I have a hockey operations director named Tom Streeter, who's been with me since day one, and Tom does everything: the bus schedule, the meals, curfew, room checks, handles all the tickets, requests, parents. Like, you have to eliminate your distractions because we have to keep all our focus on the hockey end of it. And then also a big part of the hockey thing is what you just mentioned, is just keeping the kids in the right mindset. There's so many distractions. I wish people that criticize coaches today would just take a step back and know how hard it is right now to keep the distractions at a minimum. It is a monumental task. I feel like I have a PhD in psychology now, just from experience. And every one of us as coaches from high school to college will tell you it's the same. It's just really difficult. There's just so many things pulling on people's attention now. The access is so easy with the phones and just social media, and I call it the noise. The noise that surrounds our kids is absolutely ridiculous. It's at an adult level that's pulling 16-year-old kids to just a place where they can't even concentrate anymore. And you just have to create like this safe haven, and you got to like turn it into like, 2005, and just let the kids, sit back and just focus on competing hard, caring about each other, living in the moment. Like, these are all cliches, but they're so true. And I think that's been the focus for me when we get to the playoffs. Even all year, you try to get there, but it's a monumental task, and coaching's not is what it was. So when people talk about, your X's and O's and your strategies, I'm like, that's about 10% of it. It really is. 90% of it is making sure your kids are safe, but they're also focused and they're connected. They play for each other. we live in a really selfish, distracted world nowadays, and these kids grow up, but they don't know any different. They just don't.
Right.
So for them to play for something bigger than themselves, or to play connected as a group of 3 or 5, is a foreign concept. So preaching that takes a long time.
Oh, I am so grateful that I grew up when I did. I am so happy that I grew up in the 70s and 80s and didn't have these distractions, because I don't think I would have done very well with them. And my heart goes out to these kids, because we we take for granted, guys our age take for granted that it's just, when we get to the rink, we're just at the rink and we're just playing hockey. It's, as you mentioned, it's a different world now than it was those 40 years ago. And, there's a lot of distractions pulling these kids away from hockey and from school. And it's super easy to get stuck in that vortex. And so I also believe that it's good to have that, though, where you're at the rink for a couple hours and your phone's put away and you're just doing something you love. And I think hockey and all sports in general give that to those kids, because I don't think they have a lot of that time in their world. Unfortunately, our worlds are all connected now, for better or for worse. And there's plenty of good, but those couple hours when you've just got the kids, whether it's game day or practice day, I think that's really good for them too.
Gorgie, you're onto something. I think, the one thing that I keep looking at is, activities in general, but even team sports, even more so, is just critical nowadays. It really is. It teaches things that these kids aren't seeing or hearing on a regular basis. So the more connected you get, and the distractions that you can keep down are key. And having kids that have that same support network at home is important too. I just, as we were talking here, and I was thinking about the second group we had in 23, I had such a unique, different run with those kids when we won it. But the one thing that stuck out to me is those guys really held their distractions to a minimum the last couple of years. We had kids, a lot of college coaches offering scholarships, and a lot of junior teams telling them to get out of there and leave Minnetonka and come play in the USHL. And a lot of kids, looking even at NHL draft status and central scouting. And I tell you what, that group of kids, to me, what's special about them, whether we're talking about Hagen Burroughs or Gavin Gary or Captain John Stout, Javon Moore, those kids, if you would have saw what I saw on a daily basis, they could have cared less about that other stuff, the noise. They just wanted to be with their buddies. And it was so refreshing. It was just awesome. And it's carried over to to just our community, because you can just see it in our other kids. They just generally can't wait to get to the locker room and hang out together and be together. So that was a unique group. I just wanted to make sure we connect on that too, because people always think it's always about skill, but those kids had a great way of filtering out the noise. And I think a lot of that came back to their parents and just the discipline of being together, because everyone, we probably had 6 kids that could have left early that chose not to. And I think that was really significant.
And I look at your team this year and I see a record of 6-5-1. And right away, I look at your schedule and I'm like, well, yeah, this makes sense. You guys always seem to play a super hard non-conference schedule, even though your conference and your section, as we've talked about, are plenty good. You're coming off a big win against Lakeville South. You've got Hill Murray, as we record this later this week, on the schedule, one of the top teams in the state. And for you, Goldy, I've gotten to know you well enough. It feels like the record doesn't matter right now. It's all about the process and who you're playing and how you're developing. How much does that schedule factor into your success in the postseason that you clearly have had?
Well, I think if you get through our non-conference schedule and the Lake Conference schedule and combine those two, if you're still healthy and you're playing and you've gotten your kids together for 20, 25 games, you're going to be a tough out. I don't care what year it is. I've always felt, I'm not a master of this age group yet. I think I lean on older guys that have been around and been doing it a little longer than me at the high school level, but it's so true. Early in the year, we've benefited on some of the years here where we've had a lot of guys returning, 12 to 15 guys that have played over 30 games together. So we look like we're connected and playing, a style of hockey that's comfortable for us early. And we hit the ground running in November, and we look like we're on game 20. This year, I think we have 2 kids that have played over 10 games together. That's it. So, we're on
Wow.
game 12 right now, and we're playing, a lot of teams that last year were a little younger than us, and now we're the younger team. And, these are some solid teams with, 10, 15 players that have played together, whether it's Moorhead or Hill Murray or, we saw, Rosemount's having a solid year and Stillwater's having a solid year. And Rogers just the other day, Wayzata is a lot like us. So it galvanizes you for sure. But I think the key is not to panic. Have a process where you have a plan to get the guys ready by about game 20. And once they get connected, I think by then everybody's a tough out. As you well know, you played it back in the day at Burnsville, and I did. Like, once you get to game 25 and you got some kids that have played 20 plus games together, maybe 30, 40 games together, you're a tough out. I don't care what community you're part of, you're a tough out. And that's why the playoffs are so unique at this level, because it is one and done.
Yeah.
In order to win it, you have to win 6 in a row against everybody else that is on a hot bender too. And that's really difficult to do. You don't give yourself a chance to have a hiccup. You look at pro sports or even some college, like, you get a chance where if you have a one bad game, you can win the series later. You can come back and win a 5-game series or 7-game series, and that is truly March Madness, because, we've been blessed. We've won it 2 out of my first 7 years. But I think personally, the 2 years we didn't win it, we got upset both years, my second year and last year, my 7th year, were probably the 2 teams that were probably most deserving to win it. And
Yeah,
that
I
just
agree.
shows you how difficult it is to do it. So you just can't take anything for granted. You do have to, and I know it's a cliche, but you do have to trust the process. I always look at some guys that we, our biggest rival could be and most likely has been over the last 40 years, Edina. And I just look at how Kurt prepares his team. They're comfortable playing in 1-goal games in November, and he lets the kids kind of create an identity and digest it properly. And I feel like that's really helped me get Minnetonka on the map.
Well, I got to tell you, I've been to your last 2 section finals, one that went your way, one that didn't go your way. And I got to tell you, Goldie, those are 2 of the best high school hockey games I have ever watched with my own 2 eyes. Huge crowd, great atmosphere, unbelievable hockey up and down the ice. I look forward to it every year. Like, to me, the section finals are the most exciting, because you've got all these kids gathering, and half those kids are going to see their childhood dreams play out, and half are going to see the worst possible finish, right? Like, for them, a lot of them, their high school, maybe their hockey careers are over, and they're going to be left at the edge, like the edge of the cliff, ready to have this nirvana of the dream coming true. And in these 2 cases with these section finals, in the most heartbreaking way, like overtime, 1-goal games, crazy
Yeah.
finishes. There's nothing like a section final, and those last 2 you've played in, as good as it gets.
I would agree. I go back to, I remember watching you at the old Met Center, Burnsville, in the section
Oh,
finals in those days, right? When
yep.
we'd go back to back to back, and the Met Center be packed for an entire Saturday, and
Oh,
you just spend the whole day there. And then when I was in college recruiting, we'd always sit around the staff, the coaching, staff meeting, and like kind of do a draft of like what games we were going to watch. And I would just tell the guys, these are the games I get. Like, I'm going to the section final games. I don't care what you guys say. I'm going. You guys can drive to Waterloo or Des Moines or wherever the heck you want to drive to, but I'm not. I'm going to go watch the section finals, because it was just so special watching kids play it out and communities rally around each other. And to be a part of it now on a bigger scale as a coach, watching our section grow and get stronger, and seeing some really good newer teams pop up, like Chanhassen in the last couple of years, in Shakopee, recently now this year's a really solid team. And in Eden Prairie, when you and I were growing up, was a swamp. It was just a marsh, and develop into one of the top programs in the state, and watching guys develop. It's so much fun to be a part of. The section final that Saturday preceding the state tournament, I think is as special as the state tournament itself. It's probably the greatest 2 weeks of the year if you're a hockey, fan in Minnesota, and it brings all the old timers out of the woodwork, and everybody gets to talk about their day and their time in the sun, and then just awesome memories. And I think having those experiences for the kids is probably my biggest joy. Is I got to do that as a senior in high school and live it, and just to create that same atmosphere for them is really why I think a lot of us coach, and specifically go back to our communities and do it, just to make sure that it was such a special bonding experience, not only for your teammates but for your whole youth association, your whole coaching group. My favorite memory of high school hockey was after we won the section final at the Met Center against Edina my senior year. When we got back to the locker room, my head coach, John Erickson, who was just recently passed about 2 months ago, John had every one of our youth coaches waiting for us in the locker room.
Oh, wow.
And we're talking from mites through bantams. And at that time, we had junior gold as sophomores. And every one of our youth coaches was standing in the locker room. And you want to talk about emotion. Your hair's on the back of your neck now, too. To me, that was everything. It was everything. And I actually did that my first year. I made sure some of our youth coaches that had them in bantams were in our locker room, too. Because that's really where it starts.
God, that's a cool idea. Oh,
it was
just
awesome.
Get chills thinking about that.
Awesome.
Because it's the journey,
awesome.
right? And when you play hockey in Minnesota, that tournament is iconic. That weekend is such a big deal, and every kid that's done it knows what I'm talking about. And when you get there, and I can't believe Coach Erickson had that. Is what a cool memory for you as a player to have that piece right there. That ties the whole thing together, and it just validates what they're doing too. Like most of those coaches, as we all know, are volunteers. Like they're making nothing, and they're donating all their time and all their energy to our hockey careers. And they all had a big part in the group. And that's the beauty of the tournament, is a lot of these communities, these kids grew up playing together. I look at my teammates, and we played together from the time we were squirts all the way through high school. And so when I'm still friends with a lot of those guys, when I bump into these guys now at the rink, we have all those memories together. And that's why high school hockey in Minnesota is sacred. You're doing it with your buddies. You're playing in your hometown, where your school colors. You just can't beat that.
Yep. Last comment on that is, I have a hard time sometimes explaining, like asking our kids, I'm like, you guys are so close. If you just have a little bit more buy-in or a little bit more care and love for each other, you have no idea what this is going to feel like. Like I do. I've done it as a player. I've done it as a coach twice. I've done it with a couple different staff members. And I'm like, the reward at the time when you're trying to get the buy-in, it seems significant, but the reward at the end is just so monumental. And I just think you would never even second guess putting more time in. So I always kind of look at the kids. I'm like, geez, I wish these guys would have tasted it maybe once in youth hockey, just so they know, you know what, it's worth everything we're doing is worth it. Right. So, and when you've climbed that mountain together, it's like you said, time stands still. You have buddies from Burnsville you probably hang out with and still yuck it up. I know I still see my line mate and one of my best friends for life, Justin McHugh, who you know real well. Justin and I still see each other on a regular basis. And I feel like I I could play a game tonight with him. I really do. I feel like we know exactly where we are on the ice together. We tell the same stories. We have the same exact memory, and yet we're 50, 52, 53 years old. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, right before I started recording this, I was talking to my dear friend Mike Luckcraft, coaches down at Northfield.
Love.
We have our 40-year anniversary this year of our state championship. I talk to Mike every day, and at some point, not every day, but at some point, probably weekly, the conversation tilts back to some goofy memory we had on our journey together in 1985 on that state championship team. So it's a remarkable special memory in our lives, and these kids have that opportunity playing high school hockey in Minnesota. Quickly, as I promise, I keep you around 45 minutes. You're a hockey dad, and your daughter Lauren's playing down at Minnesota State, as my buddy Dan Meyer says, horns up. How's her college career unfolding? Does she love it? And what's it like for you as a hockey dad?
Well, there's might not be anything harder than being a hockey coach, but being a hockey dad certainly falls in that category. And I've raised 3 daughters. My oldest daughter played at Gustavus and almost won a national championship there in her career for Mike Carroll. And my middle daughter played high school hockey in Northfield. And then coming up here to Minnetonka was a blessing because Lauren got to play a little bit in Northfield and then jump up to Minnetonka. And now Lolo had just a great run playing for Tracy Casano, who's a good friend of mine. And Tracy does a wonderful job. And Lauren played 4 years and won a gold medal on the 18 national team last winter, and then had the opportunity to play in the WCHA and chose to go to Mankato State to play for John Harrington and Sherry Voigt and Jeff Geeson. So we're so blessed to watch her play and also play in the area. She's having a great freshman year. She went back last night. As a matter of fact, they got to get back into game mode and playing in the WCHA on the girls' side is like playing in the SEC of college football. It's crazy competitive. Every game's a 1-goal game. She's got a lot of friends that she's played with over the last 4 years that are scattered in the league. So it seems like it's a small reunion of really high-end Minnesota girls getting a chance to kind of compete at a higher level. And it's been really fun watching her go down there and compete. And having the opportunity to get recruited by John Harrington was just full circle for me because
how about that?
John got me back coaching in the game, and I learned so much about him. And I kind of stood out of it. Way back in the day, I remember when they were going through the recruiting process with her, and I just kept telling her I don't want to get involved because I truly wanted her to go there, and I didn't want to screw it up. My parenting skills aren't nearly as good as my coaching skills, so I fail miserably at times. And I just wanted to make sure that she made the right connection, and she's thriving down there, having a great experience. I understand she's doing really well in school too. She told me she's getting a 4.0. So I couldn't be more thrilled about the selection and where she's at. So thanks for asking. She's had a great run for Minnesota hockey and USA hockey and now into college hockey. So we're pretty proud of her.
All right, final segment here, Goldy, and I'll get you on your way to the rink. Hat trick hot seat, 3 quick questions. We're going to learn a little bit about you. I'll start with this one. Your all-time favorite sports movie would be what?
Miracle.
Yeah, it's hard not to pick that one, although there's been so many great sports movies. Miracle stands out for me as well. Okay, favorite Twin Cities restaurant. I know you don't get a lot of time during the hockey season for date night, but if you're going to have a fun out, weekend night away from the rink, whether it's a date or out with buddies, what's your favorite restaurant?
Well, if I'm going downtown, you can't beat a Murray's good steak. You can't beat that. I'm staying locally where I'm out and about. I tell you what, there's a sake restaurant, a sushi restaurant over here in Chanhassen called Sake Sushi that might be the best deal in town. I love that place.
Well, that's a good tout, and I live real close to where you coach, so I have to check that out. Okay, Chanhassen's just down the road, so we're good there. This one I really can't wait for because I'm only just a little bit older than you. I want to know the first concert you attended. I want to know the band and the venue of that show.
Prince, Met Center.
Oh, that is awesome. Yeah, I was lucky enough to see Prince at the St. Paul Civic Center, so it was a different show, but it was Christmas Eve day, and I come from a strict Catholic family, and so telling my parents that I was going to see Prince, who they didn't like already,
Yeah,
parents being parents,
yeah.
that had to be a hell of a show you saw at the Met Center, though.
I'm pretty sure it was the Met Center. I could be wrong. My memory
Well, he
gets
played
smeared between
both.
the Met
No, he
Center
did.
and the
He played
Civic
both.
Center. But Prince, for a guy who drives
Oh,
by, his place
Paisley.
every day on Highway 5 now. Back then it was just a little shack on a dirt road off of Highway 5, and now it's fully consumed by the city of Chanhassen. It's pretty cool that we grew up in the 80s. I do not look like I would like Prince. I do not dance like I would like Prince, but I can tell you this, I like that guy. He's pretty darn good.
He's pretty good. Well, Goldie, I got to tell you, I look forward to watching your team play every year. I make it a point to get to a couple of games. I usually wait till the end of the year. This year, with the Four Nations face-off and the Wild being off for most of February, I'm going to get to see all your section games, and I can't wait. I really appreciate you during the season taking time to do something like this. I know it's going to be great for hockey and for kids out there to hear this, because you're one of the great, really great coaches in the state of Minnesota. We're lucky to have you, and just so fun to kind of tap into some of your perspectives on the game today. So thank you for being a part of the show.
Appreciate it, Gorgie. I appreciate your kind words. And as always, anything for Minnesota hockey, I'm all in. So amen, brother.
All right, there he goes, Sean Goldsworthy, head coach. Go out and watch the Minnetonka Skippers. You won't be disappointed. It's always a big game when they're playing because of the schedule we talked about here on the show today. That's Sean Goldsworthy. I'm back after a quick break to put a close on today's show. All right, what a conversation it was. I am very surprised that Goldy and I were able to keep this thing on the rails for under an hour. We joked before we started recording that we both get a little long-winded, and we might go too far today. And we can always circle back with Goldy and all these guests, but I try to keep these shows to around an hour, being that I'm an avid podcast consumer, from fantasy golf to fantasy football to hockey to Dateline, which is my favorite program on TV and podcast. I really appreciate when the shows are roughly an hour, because whether I'm out for a drive, taking the dogs out for a walk, it does kind of fit pretty nicely in that time frame. So we kept it on the rails today, and there are a lot of highlights in the conversation for me, but the goosebump moment was when he talked about Coach Erickson bringing in all those youth coaches when the Skippers got off the ice after that unbelievable section win against Edina, when Goldy was a senior. So we're going back to around 1990. Just incredible stuff. And to me, it's every high school season is a blessing, whether you get to the tournament or whether you bow out during section play. You're, as a kid here in Minnesota, on boys and girls sides, both, you're lucky to be playing at this level on a stage like Minnesota provides. There's no better place to play high school hockey. And I know a lot of times kids get stuck looking to the future, and they want to go here and they want to be a D1 player. They want to have a chance to be a pro and all that good stuff. But you got to soak it up when you're a high school player in Minnesota as much as you can. Play with your buddies, play with your friends, play in your community, and create those memories. If you're good enough, you're going to get to where you need to go. I've always said it. I believe it. And I lived it. And frankly, I wasn't good enough. I ended up playing a year of junior hockey in the USHL, and then I played Division III hockey at St. Thomas. Have zero regrets about it. It was a fantastic experience. But anybody I played with or against, if they were going to be a Division I player or a pro player, they were going to get there either way. And so in my opinion, and again, I know this can be a little controversial, I would never leave early. I would never cheat myself of the experience of being a high school hockey player in the state of Minnesota. There is nothing like it. I have traveled the world over in terms of hockey. You can't find that anyplace else. So I'll get off my soapbox now. That's my opinion, and it's never going to change. And so today, to hear those stories from Goldy definitely struck a chord for me. And I only coached boys high school hockey for 5 years at Burnsville and Mounds View. We never got to a state tournament. I got to one section final, and it ended in complete and utter disaster in a 10-1 loss to a team that my good friend Mark Parrish played on. If you don't believe me, the whole story is somewhere podcastable here at the Talk North Network on one of our former Wooden Stick shows. It was a disaster. Anyway, Goldy's lived the dream and been there twice now as state champions. And today we got to go back and just get a little taste of what that was like. Incredible stuff. And I want to thank him for his time. And thank you for listening. And of course, thanks once again to our great sponsors, Minnesota Masonic Charities, Onyx Maps. We couldn't be doing this without their great support. And Happy New Year one last time. We'll be back with a new show next week. Look forward to that as well. Take care.